too. Oh, good.
Okay. So when I was in the bathroom, I thought of something just to clarify something. So that whole bit, I think I created a little bit of confusion about the whole, if you're facilitating your own constellation, don't do resolutions. And then everyone's going, well, how do you do resolutions anyway? And so the reason why I had that in my notes is for those of you, like Kathy, who are constellation facilitators, or who have done it so much that you're beginning to have some feel for doing them, that news was basically for you guys, to not facilitate your own constellations, whether with cards or with people. For the rest of you, this is not a constellation training workshop. How to do resolutions in any kind of an elaborate format, it's just a bigger task than we can do in a day. So, I'm going to give you some kind of tried and true out of the box resolutions that you're going to be getting, and you've been getting some of them as you go along already, and you'll be getting more of them.
What is the field?
What's a what?
Field.
What is the field? The field is everything. From the point of view of physics, everything is information. This is information. Your to-do list that you're thinking about distractedly right now is information. Your rumbling stomach is information. The dreams that you had last night are information. The people who last did a workshop in this room are information. It's like who's seen The Matrix?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, we're all in a virtual reality in a sense, yeah. Which in its purified form is some kind of energetic information, yeah. Most of the information is invisible to us. We've got 5 wonderful senses, which in NLP we learn deletes, distorts, and generalizes so that we can actually have an experience, rather than all the time, right? So we can do things like eat BLTs and have sex. Right? If we didn't have 5 senses, we would just be experiencing everything, which is almost the same as experiencing nothing. However, with some intention, we can generate information from the field. Now, there are subfields. We're in a subfield right here. The 11 of us, plus William, are our own little field. A family is a field, a subsystem. Family soul, as Hellinger puts it. An organization, a country, an event, yeah, they're little subfields. With intention, which is what these are, yeah,
the cards.
This is an intention. That's why you want to keep your intentions really simple, because all the information's out there and the field is happy to give all of it to you. You want to keep it really simple so you can get as simple information as possible, which is what is useful. Yeah. This is why generally going into a constellation, you don't want to just kind of go, my neighbors next door, they're crazy. What's going on with them?
Do you really?
You actually, you want to question, right? That the constellation is intended to answer or address, or a desire, or an outcome. I have insomnia, I have an eating disorder, I have a whatever. The other thing that's really important about all this, which I haven't mentioned, but for this group shouldn't be a surprise, is there are things that we just are not our business. So you and I might want to help Obama right now for some reason, yeah? And help him get in touch with his father so he has good ancestral strength for the war in Syria or whatever, yeah? This is not our business. This is past our pay grade, yeah? So having a sense of what we have authority to do constellations on and what we do not is a discernment process. Generally speaking, if people are our clients, then we have authority. to do work with them and for them on their behalf. That's part of our contract. Yeah. That's kind of important. So that's my sense of the field. Bert Hellinger has a lovely phrase. I'll just put it here. It's called the knowing field. It's actually the name of the constellation fields in the generic sense journal. The knowing field. So it is our impression and the impression of many spiritual types that there's some intelligence going on here. But that's, again, a little bit past our pay grade, and you don't have to believe that for it all to work. Yeah. But there's something here that is interested in cooperating with us. My teacher has a wonderful phrase, the universe is not punishing, the universe is not rewarding, the universe is mirroring. Which for me lines up with this. That there's basically a relationship at the heart of our experience of life.
I'm sorry, can you, the first one, the universe is not punishing, the second one, universe
It's not rewarding.
Rewarding. Okay. It's mirroring.
That means it's mirroring.
Yeah.
Self.
So if you're doing this all the time, the universe, you're going to get a lot of the universe saying fuck you to you. Now this is a dilemma because we grow up in certain circumstances where this was super useful. It got us through a lot. But now we're 30 and the universe is still doing it, and we're like, oh. Yeah. Okay, so we're going to do another fun thing. You need 3 cards, William. And this time, I'm hoping this is enough. If it isn't, take 3 cards each. I cut them up so we don't use quite so many. This is for you as a practitioner. So you can use constellations to help you and your practice, either in terms of building your business, that piece of it, or in terms of a client interaction that's difficult or confusing for you. Yeah? One of the best workshops I attended at a Constellation conference a few years ago was a guy who uses he does supervision with psychotherapists, and he uses constellations to help them, work with clients better. It was brilliant. So this is going to be for you as a practitioner, okay? And what you want to do is start out with just an issue. Make it kind of simple. I have very low client flow. I really feel weird when I ask for money. All I seem to be attracting is crazy clients who don't want to pay me my fees. Whatever it is. It can be a client, I have one, I'm curious about Joe. He and I are not getting along right now. What's that about? It could be that, Client Joe. Just come up with an issue that you would like to explore now and get some support with. This is going to give you one of your go-to resolutions. I don't know what it is for you, Jill. You're going to have to come up with that. I know. It's just spacing out. So just an issue. And write that down on a piece of paper or something somewhere, not on the cards.
But what you're suggesting involving our practice for one of our clients.
Well, you can do something else in your life, but because part of this workshop is for you as practitioners, I'm giving you an opportunity to use this to improve your practice or some aspect of your work. All of us have devotional patterning. Is it that I cannot be visible and be seen in the world, and therefore I can't market? Is it, and I don't want you to think about where it came from. I do not want you doing that. But this is what we're looking for, is a devotional pattern, in a sense, a devotional pattern going on for you in your practice that's getting in your way. My apologies, I should have been clear about that first. Work is struggle. That's a good one. Work must be struggle, must be hard. Yeah.
Is there a difference here of making a statement that you feel is frustrating to deliver negative rather than asking a question? You get different results, or should I pay attention to that?
We always start out with the quote-unquote unwanted present state. So, I'm not making enough money.
Okay.
It's
not how can I attract more clients.
And then you might move it into a question. But the place to start is what's wrong? You know, what's the problem?
Okay, thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
And I'll, from a systemic point of view, now from some frameworks, we don't want to be problem-oriented in the sense that we don't want to just stay with the problem, which I agree with 100%. But from this first level, we actually do want to include the problem and honor it and name it. Even though we're not going to want to stay there. We also want to include what we want at some point. So, something you suspect might be a devotional pattern in you and your practice or your work or something like that. Everyone got something? Okay. So,
Excuse me a second.
yes.
Do we have to, we just need to have the issue, not necessarily what the pattern is?
Yeah, because that is the pattern.
Gotcha.
That was underneath.
It is what it is.
No, but they're all patterns. And okay, so this is another piece here. I'll just do this really briefly because you guys are smart and I think I need to include it. I'm going to reduce things fantastically right now. But basically problem patterns, dysfunctional patterns, come from two directions. They're either survival patterns, which they're patterns we developed as a result of survival challenges in childhood, right?
Mm-hmm.
Dad always hit me, I don't know why, but I seem to go out and find boyfriends who always hit me, right? That kind of thing. Survival patterns. And then there are the devotional patterns. Survival patterns, the driver is fear. Devotional patterns and belonging. The driver in survival patterns is fear. That's the critter, fight, flight, you've got to keep breathing stuff, yeah? And the devotional patterns. Now, we're going to go all metaphysical. Is these two are sides of the same coin. That every pattern is both survival. You can look at your childhood and say, oh, I can see where in my childhood I picked that one up. Or you can look at it and say, oh, I can see how it's a devotional pattern. This seems to be in the DNA of being incarnated humans. This, again, the planning team on being human.
Design flaw. Design flaw.
Who we all have a bone to pick with, right? Again, we were probably on the damn committee. It seems to be set up this way.
Wow.
Okay. So you can come at it either way. Those of you who are NLP practitioners, NLP tends to come at it from here, and Constellations comes at it from here. The nice thing is that for those of us who are trained in both, it's a nice synthesis. Because sometimes a problem wants to be addressed more from this angle, even though it could be addressed from this angle. It fits better. Yeah. And sometimes it really wants to be more addressed from this angle. And I'm going to get into how to sniff out devotional patterns. We're not there yet. So, if you have an unwanted pattern, yes, it's devotional. Definitely. Almost certainly. Yeah. And even though you have a good sense of, wow, I really have a feeling of how that came up in childhood, it's probably got a devotional angle too. Okay? That makes sense? Okay. Everybody got something? Okay. This is not going to be blind. So on your 3 cards, you're going to put your name. Not the words your name, but literally your name, right? Your first name is fine. Okay? On the second card, I'm just going to have you write something short and then I'll explain what it means. On the second card, just put ancestor number 1. So literally write this. Literally, not grandpa, grandma, write ancestor number 1. And on the second one, write ancestor number 2. Okay? Once you've written that, I'm going to tell you what they mean. We're just doing some shorthand so you don't have to write a really long phrase on the cards. Ancestor number 1 is an ancestor. Your devotional pattern is a great I love you too. Or what Bert Hellinger calls the one you're entangled with. You're trying to help by having this devotional pattern you've already chosen. Okay? We might call them the problem ancestor, but that's not really a fair moniker. They could be cool and be going, why are you doing this to yourself? I'm fine. Yeah? But in our experience with the field, it's not fine. Yeah? Okay? Ancestor number 2 is going to be a resourceful ancestor before the problem arose. Yeah? Who can be supportive in the situation?
Explain what you mean by before the problem arose, meaning...
So let's say you've got 4 generations of women who had chosen violative husbands. This could be a female ancestor before that pattern got started.
So
Okay.
it might be something that you create emotionally.
Yeah, and often, well, although it's really the field will manifest for you. Okay. If we all know certain problems get started because our ancestors were in the Holocaust, this would be someone before that. Someone before the Cherokee Walk of Tears, before slavery, before the disaster, whatever that is.
So the one in a healthy state,
That's fine. Yeah. We like to call it resourceful.
the resourceful one.
Resourceful ancestor.
And the other one is the one you're moored with?
No, the one you are entangled with
Entangled.
could still be 4 or 5 generations back. Now, for some of you in the room, you're going to know exactly who these people are. Most of you are not. They're going to be before the stories you have of your family. But every once in a while, someone says, oh, I know this is my dad's dad. I can just tell. That's fine. Okay. So everyone got the 3 cards? Okay. So before you move, what you're going to do is you are going to go and find a corner for yourself. You can move chairs if you need to do that. Give yourself a little constellation space. Know it's your space. So please don't overlap each other's fields. Find a space that feels like yours and respect the other people who are near you, okay? You can move some things if we need to. And in your space, you're going to put all 3 cards down. Remember, you don't want to hold all 3 at once. You're going to first find a place for you. Place that one. Just go, okay, in my little space, my little constellation space, it goes right here. Okay, good, excellent. Then you're going to place this one. In my little space, okay, it's behind that one with their back to them. Okay, good, excellent. Then spend a little time stepping into each one of them. Okay, what does this feel like? Remember going into neutral. Never step from one to the other. That's not a big deal. It just helps keep things a little clean.
Remember 2 or do not?
Not yet. Not number 2, we're holding off for a moment.
No, wait, did you say step into neutral or don't step into neutral?
In between stepping into these 2, always go into neutral in between. Never step from one right into the other one. It just helps. It just helps. And just get some information. Okay? Feel like, just get some sense of it. I'm going to be around floating a little bit. See if you feel any, step away and go, oh, I can feel some adjustments are available here. No. and then bring this one in, which will probably make this one feel a lot better. Or this one, or both. Okay? And I'm going to come around and be helping you a little bit.
So once we place ancestor number 2, step into it.
Yeah, and step into all of them.
Around,
Yeah.
noticing what we notice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And you're going to have a little time to do this, okay?
And we just notice it and keep that info to ourselves, or we
Write
write it down?
down.
Okay.
I mean, some of you can keep it all in your head. That feels good. Write down what you want to write down. Yeah. Your process is your process. Okay, off with you. Yeah, there's room for at least 2 in here. And William, if you need help, just say so, okay?
No, it's very clear. Thank you.
Yeah, I just mean in terms of facilitating, but I know you have experience, so. You can do something like this, yeah? And then go back to your modality. Yeah. Or you can let it be at the end of the modality, at the end of the session, or wherever it belongs in there. I hope for those of you who come from more psychotherapeutic backgrounds and may have exposure to psychodrama, and there's some other similar versions, there's some Gestalt role-playing kind of stuff, that there's overlap here, but it is subtly different. And in their best versions, those modalities do this too. But what we're claiming here, and it is a bold claim, but it feels like it always keeps on proving itself, is that we're actually engaging the system. We're not pretending to. We're not role-playing. That due to the field, we actually manifested you, that ancestor you're entangled with, and that resourceful ancestor. They were there in that little circle. And we actually adjusted that system. And I'll never forget, I will never, ever, ever forget. I was 21 or 22, I was in therapy, and the guy said, imagine your father over there. What would you say to him? And I said, I can't do that. I was I couldn't pretend that. I couldn't, I felt like I'd be performing in front of the therapist. I just couldn't do it. Years later, my experiences in Constellations, if you hold the intention that we're in the field, I have never had a client say, no, I can't do that. Ever. Ever. Because they feel even if they haven't consciously said what I just said, it's no different than if my father really was sitting in the chair and I was actually having a conversation with him, and that wouldn't feel weird in front of the therapist. Well, it might for other reasons, but. So if you can presuppose that what you're doing is natural, I'll give a really good example of this. For one reason or another, I have had a lot of clients with sibling distortions of one sort or another in their childhood. Siblings who were died before them, aborted, kept secret, only found out later, adopted out, children by other marriages who were abandoned, yeah, all that sort of stuff. Sibling difficulties of one sort or another. So I'll give an example. In a family, 4 kids, in adulthood, in their 40s, they found out their mother had had an affair many years earlier and had had a child, and the child had been adopted out. And when the topic came up again, it was clear that mother had an extremely ferocious, I almost hate to say this, she used to call him the wart. It was just the most disturbing thing I'd ever heard. Yeah, the child, the adopted out child. She was so angry about the whole thing. So my client was the eldest of 4. Okay, that's her. Okay. but actually she wasn't of her mother. She was the second of her mother.
Mhm.
Okay? So what I did, she's sitting on the couch. I'm going to be her. And all I did was, and this was coming up, yeah? So I put her 3 siblings, and she went, okay, yeah. And then I said, you're first of your father, but you're second of your mother. And she burst into tears. Because for the first time, it felt right.
Acknowledged.
Everything had been just a little off. Sorry, William, I'm on the floor with cards to my left and to my right. I do that a lot. I don't know why there's so much sibling stuff, but there's a bunch of it. You know, the aborted child, the miscarriage. I have one client. Can you imagine being in this situation? Actually, I'm going to do this so he can see. Because that's not good. Because I'm going to do it again. He's on my couch. I discover he's a single child, right? It's a difficult situation all by itself. Often being the only child is difficult, but no. 4 children.
What?
All the others were aborted. Can you imagine being the only one let to come to term in that family? And to feel that energy. And a big part of our work together was just reuniting him with his siblings, who he'd felt all his life and felt guilty about, because he was the one who got to live. Now that's an intervention all by itself. There's no resolution other than including. That's it. That's all it requires. It doesn't require anything fancy, right? Just including the bits in the list, right? Honoring what is, including the ones who belong. Yeah. Sometimes it's the lost uncle. Sometimes it's any of you have parents who had a one of them had an original love who they couldn't stay with for some reason, or who died, and they ended up with the other, like your mom loved, someone who went off to war, he never came back, and ended up with your dad, who was clearly choice number 2. Yeah. We can re-include the lost one. And then something goes, right? I mean, even when I'm just sort of re-evoking it here, everyone in the room can kind of feel that. Yeah?
Can I ask a quick question about resolutions and body posture? And I realize that the out-of-the-box body posturing is that the youngest and newest one to the system gets to sit down and the others are in hierarchical physical relationship.
Right.
But in my constellation, it was the exact opposite, and it felt good. So I'm wondering how either to make sense of that or not to worry about it because it felt right and felt strong.
What specifically felt right?
The difference between the ancestors behind me, the helper ancestor helping the problem ancestor, holding on the ground, crumbling, taking care of and exhausted.
So did you try at least sitting down?
In my role?
Yeah.
No.
You might see. That's what I would say. Is just try it.
Okay.
Be small. As usually, what's helpful is if the parents or ancestors need to be small with respect to something bigger, then we don't want the kids towering over them as they do that. Just to try it and see what happens. This is kind of useful to be down here for a little bit and let them. Because yes, some of our ancestors never got to be small. I mean, if we have an ancestor who was orphaned young, they need someone to feel small with respect to. But out of respect, we probably want to get ourselves down. Yeah? Yeah? Yeah.
I didn't sit down in the exercise. I'm glad that
That's
you
fine.
said that.
Yeah.
But at the end, I felt necessary to bring number 2 and number 1 ancestor together
Okay.
to honor them. And then I was like, "Oh, I gotta include me." So I put us all 3 together,
That's fine.
and that was my way of like saying thank you.
That feels good. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah. And this is your guiding force. It's not just what feels good, because sometimes What feels good is bad, right? Feels good to be strong and the biggest one in the system, but it's ruining your life. So this, again, is everything being honored and seen. Is there a balance of giving and taking? That's usually more subtle, and it's more couple relation. Is the right seniority and hierarchy being respected here? Is there a wrong that needs to be addressed? Okay, so there's your checklist. So you begin after a while to feel like, even if something doesn't feel quite wrong, well, we're gonna, I'll get to that in a moment. Beth, you had your hand up, and then I have one last little lecture here before I send you off to lunch.
Because I've done lots of constellations and with you, I brought in a representation for life.
Okay, yeah.
To be behind my lineup of 1 and 2. It just felt like the system needed that.
That's fine. Yeah. One of the things you want to do is go, if you want to learn how to use these tips and tools better, come to lots of constellations, represent, get a sense for some of the classic moves, bringing in life. After the ancestors, there are things that are bigger, depending upon kind of the meaning set you have. So there can be life, there can be God, if that's part of your meaning system. It can be Mother Earth sometimes is really relevant, particularly for injuries in mother lines. Father Sky is often a nice archetype for injuries through father lines. Sometimes it's a country. We can have a really, I cannot tell you, Kathy's probably seen some of these, where the Irish diaspora is such an intense wound that we bring in Ireland and everyone just starts to cry. Because and then there's a sense of you're always my daughter, even though you're in a different land. You're always born of me. You always belong. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That kind of thing can feel really, really, really good. Often countries that either they would have preferred not to leave or whatever it is can be really, really, really useful. Mm-hmm. So sometimes, bigger things can be really helpful. Yeah.
So my biggest question since being exposed to this work, which just kind of blew my whole world of mental constructs completely apart, is you're saying, so we actually are engaging these people. How?
The field. The field.
Sort of tautological.
I don't know. Understand? I don't understand what that means.
Answering the question with if we engage them, because it's the field is about engaging them, so each question is answering the other. So is it through the, one person, for example, said to me, I think that we're tapping into the consciousness of the client. Would you agree with that? Or do you think that that everybody has a second self that's accessible through the field, or
yes.
What is your mental model for how is it that my dad is here? He's not here. He's in North Carolina.
Right. Yeah. So we could get into a really heady conversation about when you say the consciousness of the client. What does that mean? Is it plugged into a collective unconscious? If we are all source, are we all expressions of source? Do we have access to everything at once through our own consciousness? Mm-hmm. Except, it only opens more cans of worms the more we get into it. So whatever model you have of it is fine.
But like a little kid asks you, how does this work? And you say to them,
we're all information in the field, and we're finding some way intergenerationally to connect with the information of the relevant elements of the system. I'll just give a few examples. We come together, we do a constellation on behalf of someone's child. The child is not in the room. Mom goes home and finds the child is starting to behave really differently. How did that work when we didn't have the child in the room? We have a constellation, and the next day someone says, it's really weird, I haven't heard from my Uncle Joe in 10 years, and he called me. WTF. Yeah. You do a constellation. In it, all the siblings are together and the parents and things are put in better order. And the next Thanksgiving, everyone is treating each other with more dignity. You know, I don't know. I remember one that I loved, which was we ended up focusing mostly on Mom, with whom she had a very problematic relationship. And she said, you know, nothing's changed with Mom, but things between me and Dad are so much better. The only way I can explain that is that we are addressing the system. And we're rearranging, we're putting things in order in the system itself. And it's not just an individual consciousness. Unless you understand the individual consciousness is connected to the general consciousness, in which case I'm cool with that framework too. I just have too many experiences of this affecting elements and people who aren't there.
Well, I don't understand that it happens. I've had these things happen myself with my own kids and my parents. I don't want to bog you down in this. I know you've got a lot to cover, but if anybody else, I'm very like.
Well, and I've given you my framework, which is that we're engaging the field and we're addressing the elements in the field, and then it goes back and it's information again. As a former physicist, that works for me. I can almost see the little matrix, little dots and stuff. What Carl Blue quite often says at the end of his constellations is, and for whatever makes this work, we're not quite sure what it is. I want to get in just a few more points before we go off to lunch. This is going to get into the bulk of what we're going to do this afternoon, which is you're going to be working with each other and trying to put this hat on as you engage with each other.
Leslie, ask you a quick question before you change gears. Just quickly, when you're giving us the demonstration of including the siblings with someone on the couch, so you'd be dealing with a client, and then would you ever go into facilitating a little 10-minute constellation, having them take on different roles, or would you just?
I do that frequently, and sometimes my 2-hour NLP sessions just become little one-on-one constellations. Having said that, one of the discernments you need to have a feeling for, this is what's really helpful for people who've had training in rapport skills and in calibration skills, which is the basic NLP toolbox, is to know when it's right to have a client step into X, Y, or Z, and when it kind of isn't. Yeah? And that there's no universal on that. Sometimes it's super useful to have a client stepping into all these different roles. Sometimes I have them sit on the couch and watch, and I step into all the roles. Sometimes we mix it up. Sometimes I only have them in their role. Sometimes, and I'm just trying to calibrate what the client's ready for, what they're welcoming, what I'm pushing too hard. Like they still need to be really angry at Mom or whatever it is, and so it's not ready to be moved in any way. And that's just experience over time kind of a thing. A general rule of thumb is clients stepping into their parents is usually not useful. This is not an absolute rule of thumb. It can depend. The main reason is that we actually experienced our parents very intensely most of the time. Yeah, we had, Mom really did yell at us a lot. Dad really did hit us or incest us, or Mom and Dad really were unhappy with each other, and we watched them fight for years, or whatever it was. So that's extremely fraught. And when we deal with that, people tend to regress appropriately and understandably, right? To try and accurately represent the parent, that's asking a whole lot of their system.
We just did that, though.
Well, if one of your ancestors was a parent.
We did. Oh, I see.
Yeah? And I think for some of you, you felt like probably it was. And like I said, there's tons of exceptions to that. I'm trying to come up with a few rules of thumb. If they're really blamey and angry at their parents, do not have them step into their parents, flat out, until you've got that moved more. That's just, help them find some kind of shift in that revision a different way.
And then do you step into the parent instead?
Exactly.
Just to follow up,
Yeah.
so one of the things you had mentioned was, so I'm imagining at some point you'll be dealing with a client, and then you'll set up one of these,
Yeah.
and you will step into the roles, you're representing it all, you're working something out and reporting back to them?
I might be. I do it lots of different ways.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm just sitting there across from them and saying, you know, I'm stepped into your grandfather right now, and he loves you so much. Now again, we might have to build up to that, because if I just sit down and say that, people will go, what do you mean? You're making that stuff up. You want me to feel good now. So, you know, you have to create a framework together in which something like that would make any sense. Yeah? You might even say, can you just, you know, and there's some NLP stuff, there's some hypnotic languaging stuff around that that's really helpful too. You know, step into him, fingers in his fingers, toes in his toes, breathe with his chest, feel his heart beating in your chest. Just be inside of him a little bit. What's it like in there when he looks at you? And then generally burst into tears. Yeah? Okay, I want to get a few things across. And like I said, come on, I should just videotape a bunch of sessions.
Right.
Just training things.
Yeah.
Okay. So this it's in the same framework, but I want to shift into helping you, like when you're in interaction with a client, when might a constellation intervention be useful? AKA, when do you have a sense of when devotional patterning might be going on? So, we'll just put it devotional. Oh, this is a good black pen. Patterning giveaways. Okay. Oh, it's going to die soon. Okay. So the simple one is you've seen the list, you're integrating it. When you see the orders of love being violated in any way, that can just show up explicitly. You know, you had 3 siblings aborted, and you were called an only child. Ding, 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 ding. Right. Okay. So order of love violation. Okay. When they say something like, I have my dad's anger, and I'm like all those Italians, yeah? They just say something like that. People will say those kinds of things just as really, really commonly. This is a big one, and I think it's what Beth was getting at when she brought in life. When the client is noticeably lacking in strength, resourcefulness, or what I call general reach for life. Yeah? So you got someone who can't get employed or fully employed, who can't get a boyfriend or a girlfriend, who there's no gas in the tank, is the way I put it. It's the running on fumes thing. Either throughout their life or really strongly in an area of their life. It's just what generally in the 80s we call disempowerment, right?
Probably just about everybody, even by this point in the list.
Well, everyone's got devotional patterning. The question is whether devotional patterning is at the issue that the client is bringing to you. That's what I want to, yeah, we all got it. Sometimes someone just wants to nail their next job interview. And then I'm not going to go here. I'm going to resource them for their next, unless they have a history of blowing job interviews, in which case we might be in this territory. Okay. intense over triggering. And these are all just, maybe giveaways isn't the right word.
Hints, clues?
They're things that could indicate, possible indicators. Might be a better way to put it. We'll put possible indicators. Okay. This is when this comes back to the structural constellation context. Too many moving pieces. It's a really complicated system. You can't get any feel of it. What that's just time out. There could be something systemic going on that's important. You as the practitioner going along and you say to yourself in your own language, whatever your version of this is, something's missing. The pieces are not coming together. I'm going to do that last bullet. When, this is a really good one, when local information, and I'll explain that in a second, isn't enough to explain what's going on. So this is a really important one in the whole regressed memory movement, where people ended up having the symptoms of sexual violation, but there seemed to be no history of it. And so some of them did have repressed memories. Others, it seemed, repressed memories got created and probably were not true. What we need to understand as practitioners is that trauma is transgenerational. If your mom was raped, you could feel like a rape victim. Children of vets have PTSD. This is something they're coming up with in the psychology literature right now. It's really, really interesting in the whole epigenetics thing, et cetera, et cetera. Okay? Trauma is transgenerational. This is just really, really important to understand. So just because you can be with a therapist who's like, holy shit, you're doing all the physiology of a incest survivor. But there's no, that was wonderful. No, and no, it didn't happen. We'd be curious about what went upstream, yeah? Which is so much more useful than finding a violator amongst non-violators, right? Which does all kinds of damage, right? So I'm just going to put this, when local information isn't enough to explain what's going on. Local info doesn't explain it. So you've done the childhood interview, you've done all that stuff, and it's just like, I don't get why I'm so miserable. I have the etiology of somebody who had a miserable childhood, and I actually had a pretty happy one. WTF, okay? Intense blaming of parents. Again, it's an indicator, it's not necessarily the case. And I really want to be clear about this. Parents around the world do terrible things. They do terrible, 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 terrible things. And being able to name and include that back to that sheet is really, really, really important. However, most people are aware that when we get stuck here, it usually means that something else is going to get stuck too. Yeah. So there's got to be some other way to include the violations without being stuck in the blaming. Yeah. So often there's something devotional there. Despite lots of change work and therapy, et cetera, the pattern hasn't changed. Pattern won't budge. Not because the work wasn't really good, but because it's like when you have a knee pain, and someone who's a doctor could help me out with this, and it turns out, and they've done everything with the knee to fix your knee, and it turns out it's something in your fourth vertebra. Yeah. If you're not working systemically, very frequently, the place where we can actually address the problem is just not being included. And so it becomes really hard to change it. And then the last one, I'm going to put on the side. This is like, if you forget all the rest of these, this is the kicker. The innocent smile. And this is very specific. And I want you to watch me. See if I can role play this for a moment. Yeah, I just can't seem to ever get enough money. My anxiety, I've had it my whole life. That's kind of overdoing it, although it can be that explicit. It's the smile that goes along with talking about pain, yeah? And it's called the innocent smile because the child who's seeking to belong through this pattern, it's an attempt to remain innocent and belong to the family. So there's a place in there where it makes me feel good. But that doesn't tend to be very conscious. I feel terrible because I don't have money all the time. Damn it. But underneath it, it makes me feel innocent and like I belong. Every once in a while, clients can be really explicit about that. If I didn't have depression, I wouldn't know I was a NIPS. I mean, people will say things like that, right? If I were to be successful in work, I wouldn't know I was a NIPS. Oh, so you'd be the first one? Yep. Huh. That's rough. Now I'm going to give a little metaphor that I give to clients at this point when I'm starting to feel into this with them. And then I'm going to leave you all for lunch. So all of you can do this with me. Imagine, this is not a meditation, this is just an analogy. Imagine you're at a lavish dinner event in a banquet hall. And all of your ancestors who have had a tough time in life, whoever they are, not the ones who had the easy time, but the ones who had the really difficult time, are at this banquet with you. And they all have empty plates. Yours is piled full with wonderful food. And a voice says, dig in. Who amongst us would not feel guilty about eating? Or who amongst us would not feel a bit of innocence by saying, no, thanks you, I'm fine, I'm good. I'm good. Part of the dignity of becoming adults, becoming humans in this world, is even though our ancestors did not have that food, we eat. Bert Hellinger says, to be alive is to be guilty. And one of the challenges of being adult and individuated is having a proper relationship with that guilt. To not put it aside, not to reframe it out, but to understand that, okay, I will eat although they could not. Now what makes it easier is if we can get in touch with them saying, oh, for God's sakes, dig in. Mm-hmm. That's what we would have done if we could have.
But they're saying that.
Yeah. if they've been dead long enough. Some of them might be still a little cranky dead.
How many years does the shift tend to take?
Some of them do it before they die. There's no rule of thumb about that.
Who said to be alive is to be guilty?
Bert Hellinger. Although that's not original to him. The whole, just to say a few words about that and then send you off. Bert is the best at this, but he's not the only one to have noticed this. To belong is to be innocent. To be separate, and there are actually some subtleties on this, but I'm not going to get into them, is to be guilty. Now, in order to be here today, everyone in this room had to choose to be separate from something else. So to belong here means to be separate somewhere else. This is our whole lives, right? Who amongst you, in order to go off to college, had to have the experience of being guilty for doing that? It's not true in all families, not true in mine, but in some families it is. Who, for some of you, to not go to college? Yeah? That's why we have that line, I honor the dignity of your fate, please bless me as I choose a different way. Please bless me as I feel guilty. Yeah? So there are things we do in the Constellation context to make it easier. Yeah? But part of this is, well, dignity is a big word. Yeah? It's taking our proper place, our proper weight in life. Yeah?
And could you speak to the issue, if you see it at all, of fighting for innocence? Once we separate out, I know this is right for me, but then it feels like there's some kind of struggle to feel innocent.
Right. So here's the big thing. This is so great. You can actually never not belong. I'm going to be different from you. Yeah. I mean, that's a role, right? That's the orders of love. You always belong to your family. Yeah? So as we separate and are different, we still belong. That's the solution to the dilemma, right?
But the members of the family may not treat you as
In actual life, people are jerks and they exclude and they do all that stuff, right? But in the place of the heart or the spirit or the dignity of the self, it's not like, oh, I will tolerate not belonging in order to be separate. Like, I'm going to separate and know I still belong to you, whether you know it or not. And I see that in you too. Yeah. For a moment, I had another phrase. What was it? Ah! You asked the question. Being separate. It's gone. That's right.
Can I offer something someone said to me recently, which was, we all belong to each other, she said.
Well, that's true too. I mean, Bert Hellinger would say there's a trans-ancestral belonging. There's a higher, I mean, there are levels that, you know, in the sense we're all, I mean, if you believe in this context, we're all source. So there's also no separation. Again, part of the planning team was to convince us that there was separation, apparently for some purposes. But I'm remembering now, one of the organismic rights that children go through, this is a really, really nice, and many of us do not successfully make it through this developmental moment, which is the right to be separate and still belong. In a healthy family, that's one of the successful things we come to integrate. But for many of us, it becomes an either or. And that's really unfortunate when families communicate that. Okay, I'm way past what I want to do. Go out to lunch, and be back in, can we say 2:15?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
Where are there places to?
So if you want to walk or drive, it's fine. University is about 3-4 blocks that way. It's a bunch of Indian restaurants and other kinds of things